using with our mic, I'm just going to leave the mic here, and hopefully it might pick up a little bit better. I'll check it for that. So if we make start, I'd like to introduce Martin Richardson, Professor of Modern Holography. We're going to do something really exciting and make holograms, I think. We're going to try to make it. So we've got all sorts of kit here, which I don't know. So Martin's written books on holographies, received research funding and grants and all sorts of things, and I think one of the world's leaders in what you do, I think. So I'll leave you to explain. I'll leave you to explain what we're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for staying behind, because you must be so hungry. You've heard so many words today already. So I know I'm dealing with people now which are relatively hardcore. You know, you're here because you want to actually learn something about holography. And I hope you can do that today. We have a couple of samples of holograms here. See that? So that's a true colour hologram. It's the first of its type. So these will all be here for you to, have a look at towards the end. And then on the floor, what I'm looking at, but you can't see, is a hologram of Seattle. It's up the skyline. I'm going to tip it like this now. Okay, so it's downloaded from Google Earth, and it's been created in polymer using a sophisticated laser system. Doesn't look much like a city until you put it on the floor and you've got the aerial view. So that's going to be there for you to have a look at as well. I'm terribly aware that when you're dealing with new technology, you're also struggling with words, because we sometimes develop technology which doesn't have titles. So what I advocate to my students is this fact, and that's that we think in pictures, but we understand with words. So we're going to come back to that. How many of you know what a hologram is? Okay, what's your definition? Give me a very brief definition of what you think a hologram is. An animation 3D could be, yeah.
It was an image in 3D.
An image
Sorry,
in...
it's a French accent. So
Yes.
an image in 3D.
An image in 3D. One more. Here. Yep.
Placed in flight.
Good. Okay, well, you're all right, actually, but the real definition of a hologram is it's an information package. Okay, if we look at this in a more analytical, scientific way, and the definition of a hologram, if you go through the Darius and the Thesaurus, is it's also a book. It's words on paper. It's any complete volume of work. It's an ink, a wax seal, a credit card. I personally developed a particular type of hologram into silver, but also it can be any digital storage device. You can apply the principles of holography to sound waves. It's not just restricted to visual waves. Some psychologists, experimental psychologists, also think that holographic theory can be applied to thought waves and the way we actually perceive our world. So therefore, our brain. This is the most popular misnomer. This is what people think holograms are. And believe me, every week I get phone calls from people saying, I've got £50,000, I've got a new advertising campaign to sell a shed load of tools. Can you make a hologram? It's like, well, what's your concept of holography? And most people think of R2-D2 projecting Princess Leia in Star Wars. Guys, it's not possible. Okay, science fiction. This is another one, YouTube. Type in holograms into YouTube, right? You're going to get Tupac, Kate Moss and Donna on stage performing live. They're not holograms. there's something called Pepper's Ghost. They use the word holography to sell an illusion. You know, the word hologram is one of the most overused and abused words in the English dictionary. So Pepper's Ghost is basically a digital projection using a semi-silvered mirror, and it's really become very popular and mainstream at the moment. So let's look at the facts. Let's think about what really is a hologram. Maybe we can learn something from this today. A simple hologram is capable of storing up to 1 million terabytes of information. That tiny hologram I showed you there carries around 1 million terabytes. The way we process information can also be compared to a hologram. Understanding our universe, therefore, and to be quite honest, we don't really understand the technology enough to know its full potential and therefore where we're going with it. These are some of the current applications of holography. So we're starting down there on optical elements and sensors, security. You've all got holograms in your credit cards, in your wallets, on your passports. We've also got imaging. I've worked on several projects with well-known people, David Bowie, Peter Blake, for example, and Martin Scorsese, have all used holograms in their work at some point. Data storage. This is an interesting one because presumably you're all involved with digital information and the way you can store digital information. Now in physics there's a thing called Moore's law. Anyone familiar with Moore's law? Yeah. Okay. That is where technology, you know, doubles or repeats itself every 7 years, and we're reaching a point now where it's going to be impossible to send bigger packages of work because we're restricted by the actual methods that we're using in wireless communications. Sorry? Okay. But a hologram promises to circumvent that in the way it stores information. Other ways of projection, head-up display, and the potential use here of using a diffractive element in a window to harness daylight. This is a very sort of brief academic overview of why we've arrived at holography today. We go back to 1830 stereoscopics, you know, the old sort of stereoscopes that people used to look through to see stereo views, all the way through to lenticulars, integral photography, photosynthesis. It's all coming towards digital holography. So, just to give you a basic principle of how a hologram is made, over here we've got a laser. We're going to try and use this laser in a few moments to try and create a hologram. But if we were to explain the principle of how a hologram is made, the laser beam would be split into two. Okay, one of those laser beams would carry information about an object, and the second laser beam would be a pure source of light, and it's where the two interfere and produce a standing wave that one can create a hologram. Now that principle can also be applied to predictive technologies, and any technology. So on one hand, we're looking at this, for example. We've got holographic technologies here starting on 2026 to 2025, and on the other hand we've got the holographic applications. So we've got this merging of the two forms of energy coming together to produce an interference pattern. And if we think of the interference pattern as colliding and using the certain curvature of time, you can reliably predict what technology is going to be developed in about 5 years from now. And this is another take on that particular angle. So stereo, let's think about this. coming back to the concept that a hologram is an information package, you can take two sets of information of a three-dimensional image and end up with a third set of information. You can either use a stereo rail system. This is one of my studios I'm working in, where we're using 135 SLR cameras simultaneously taking photographs of a subject. And over here you can see what we refer to as a stereo rail system, where a camera moves along from left to right, and as it does so, takes in up to 300 photographs. So, this is one of the holograms I recently recorded. Her name is Amy. That's a photograph of the hologram. So let's see if we can capture Amy. Now these are movies, they don't seem to be playing. Not quite sure why.
We upload, we put them in.
They were on the file actually,
Yeah.
Chris.
Might have lost the link.
Right. Yeah. So it's quite important we see these. It's a shame if we can't, but never mind. Because you'll see that once we start to include more than 1,000 images, strange things start to happen. They become time-based, odd things, optical phenomena occur. Did you drag the entire file?
Yeah, they all want it there.
Yeah?
So that one.
Okay, yeah, well, play either one of those. Okay, yeah, great. So there we have 1,000 images. You can see the camera's moving across there, it's tracking across. This was another one I was going to show you, but never mind. So coming back to the principles of how a hologram is created, laser beam, the laser beam split into two. One of the beams focuses through a lens, becomes our reference beam. Our second beam is bounced through a lens onto a mirror, onto the object. And so you can see that the light bouncing off the object onto this photographic plate or light sensitive surface, which could even be our eye, creates the hologram. Replacing the three-dimensional image with a computer screen implies that we're recording a hologram of a two-dimensional surface. But if you then change the image on a computer screen, re-expose, change again, re-expose, you end up with a digital hologram or a synthetic image. Now I'm just going through stereo images allowed to combine into two sets of information. You can combine up to 4,000 sets of information. There's me in the lab. You can start to see some of the equipment I'm using. So this is a fairly standard lab. Here we've got a helium neon laser. This is one of the world's first RGB pulse lasers, so we can record holograms of living people. The lenses, the optics I use are relatively large. There are other components around here. So when you go into a holographic studio or laboratory, they can be fairly daunting. But the results you get from them are amazing. So this is one of the last exhibitions I had in Leicester. We have 3 digital holograms here, and each one is projecting off the wall by about 1 meter. So lots of fun to be had. What is a laser? Well, there's again, lots of misnomers and myths about what a hologram or what a laser is. And so what we've got here is a very simple low-powered laser, and I've passed it through a lens. It's being expanded onto this surface here. Now, do you notice anything peculiar about the way the light's behaving? What's weird about that? Can you see a kind of a graininess, a speckle? Okay, if you keep that still, if you move your head, you'll see the speckle moves. Okay? It's difficult for you guys over there, I'm sorry. You might get it from the... Actually, can you all see that on the ceiling? Yeah. Okay, so if you move, the speckle moves. It's moving because, probably for the first time, you're becoming aware that you're seeing individual photons of light turning off and on, individual rods and cones inside your eye. Okay, it's a phenomenon, and it's part of your own constitution. It doesn't exist externally to you. It's also an effect that can be used in in predicting or analysing eye defects. If you suffer from a certain type of stigmatism, for example, it goes in a certain way. But believe you me, the speckle is in fact individual photons of light turning off and on individual cells in your eyes. Cool. Right, so laser speckle. Laser stands for light amplification of spontaneously emitted radiation. We're looking at individual photons of light or light packages, and for any of you that did physics at school, you'd understand that. I don't really want to go into the physics now, to be honest with you, but it's basically an orbit of energy around a molecule. Now, what's important about the word energy is everything we see around us. When I'm looking at you, I'm not really looking at you, I'm looking at wavefronts of light falling from you. I'm looking at packages of energy falling from you. And the challenge has always been in photography and holography. How do we capture the wavefronts, how do I capture that energy? Well, we found recently that through the use of nanotechnology, we can do this in a rather novel and special way. Because, how can I put this? The nanoparticles of silver absorb energy like no other material that we're aware of. So if I'm recording a hologram of you now, and we could do that if I had a more powerful laser, an energy packet from you would fall onto the silver crystal and be stored like a battery. Okay? The silver is hungry for energy, it absorbs energy and retains it over a period of several hours. And then when we process the silver crystals, we release that energy, and the silver crystals transform from silver nitrate into silver halide. Actually, it's the other way around, it's from silver halide to silver nitrate. And that's one of the experiments we're going to do in a moment, if we've got time and if we've got the patience. So let's make a hologram live, and you shouldn't have seen that one, never mind. So I've got an assistant here, Lizzie, who's a trainee holographer. Lizzie, if you'd like to join me. Thank you. Now, it may not work, right? But if it does, fantastic. And it's going to require chemistry. So in here, it looks disgusting, I know, but it's chemicals. It's non-organic, by the way. So this is what we refer to as a bleach, and this is a developer. We've got a hairdryer here, because we don't like wet holograms, so we're going to dry the hologram quickly for maximum effect. Plug this in. I'll tell you what, we're going to put this here. Incidentally, when we expose the hologram, it's going to have to be in complete, or close to complete darkness, just to put the pressure on. Okay, so, object-wise, strange objects. Okay, the challenge to you as creative artists is to select the most interesting objects. Right, so if anyone has any flashes of inspiration, let me know. This goes on here. So what I'm doing at the moment is setting up a relatively stable environment if anything moves as much as 1 micron during the exposure, the hologram's not going to work. So I want to give it a fighting chance here. So there we've got the laser going through the lens. I'm going to bring the lens down. Here's my nanoparticle silver plates. It was incredibly tempting to do a big blue Peter trick, you know, make one before I came on, but quite, let's do it for real. Okay, so we don't want the light going onto the plate before the exposure, so I'm going to use this as my shutter.
Let me know when you want the projector.
No.
Yes.
Good. Okay, that's a good light. That's
dark
perfect.
enough.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely perfect. The plates are sensitive, but not that sensitive. Okay, so here we go. If this doesn't work, nothing gained, nothing lost. Here's our photosensitive plate. I'll just load this thing. Just going to slide in here. Okay. We're almost there. Okay, so the plate's loaded, the object's just behind the plate. Now I'm going to ask you all to stand back a sec, because it's now really, you know, a sensitive situation where if anything moves as much as a micron, we can destroy the exposure. I'm going to ask you all to wish me luck. Okay, so it's going to be a 3-second exposure. Here we go. Now, that's all there is to it. If it's worked, keep the lights off. We're going to process this now. If it's worked, we should see something soon. Yeah, that's fine. So, right. Before I left this morning, I went to the food cupboard and stole my wife's bowls, and she promised me, maybe promised I'd bring them back in one piece, but we'll see. Lizzie, if you could hold that for me. Okay. Here we have the developer. That's a good light. Thank you. Okay, let's go. So it's now in the developer. I can see it slowly going black, which is a good sign. So the silver crystals are releasing the energy. There's now a chemical reaction taking place. It's taking a bit longer than I thought. It could be because the chemicals are cold. And this is something you could all do in your kitchens at home or bedrooms, you know. It's great fun. It's so much better than watching TV. There goes the bleach. Alright, so it's gone slightly black, and at this point, Chris, we could turn the lights on. Go back over here. Right, so if we can't see a wet hologram, I'm going to dry the hologram. What would you make a hologram of? $64 million question.
How big can you make a hologram? Is there a scale?
Size of Arnold River. Arnold River.
Who's he?
Famous hologram from Red.
Oh my God, of course. You're absolutely right. Right. You got me.
Size of Seattle.
The size of Seattle. But realistically, 2 by 1 meters.
Right.
Okay, right, and Chris, would you like to have a look? Oh, right, yeah. Hey! You guys see that? Okay, well I'll leave it here. You can steal this one. There's going to be somebody in the audience who's going to, have that. So I'll leave it there for you to peruse. Okay, so just to finish off then, because you're all hungry. Yeah. Thanks. My one word of advice to you all is, become involved with technology, get your hands messy. Thank you, Shushi. Are you good Shushi? I like the Shushi. What's going to happen tomorrow, the future tomorrow as well? Okay, that was a great program. Next generation TVs will not require eyewear. I'm developing a holographic system with Panasonic at the moment. It should be on the streets by 2010. By 2020, holographic display systems will be based on wavefront reconstruction, because this technology is not going to go away, and it's just going to become more prevalent and important to your futures as young people. And by 2030, all optical electronic communication will capture and replay 3D images by augmented reality and eye tracking. I kid you not. You know why? That's why. Okay. Questions?
Adams here yesterday is a games design professor.
Yeah.
And he was saying that one of the limitations we have is with the speed of eye tracking software and the speed of reaction to the input to our eyes, to movements, to stop nausea and things like that. How far are we away from getting that technology to work?
Okay. Sometimes, I could be travelling on a bus or a train or something, and I look out the window and I feel slightly nauseous. I used to travel from travel sickness as a kid, and it's all to do with the way, more to do with our perception rather than the technology, perhaps. There's going to be 20% of our audience now this afternoon that actually really don't like holograms. They're kind of eerie. They're slightly sort of, odd. Particularly if you see a hologram of a human being. I'm coming back to it, okay? I haven't forgotten the question, it's just I'm trying to think of a way of answering it sensibly. Let's address the key question of movie making. If you're making a movie, you're really dealing with between 16 and 24 frames per second. Okay, anything less than that, it becomes a flicker. We're not fooled by it. Anything higher than that, we move into high resolution, bandwidths, etc., where everything becomes closer to reality. So, given that we're going through this transformative epoch of technology at the moment, I would think 5-10 years before the technology becomes indistinguishable from reality. And that's worrying, and I think it worries us all, although we may not be conscious of that. And I think that's probably being reflected in some of the unrest we're currently witnessing around the world, actually. Because it goes a lot deeper. Technology is not just about, the superficial hard sell in advertising. It's about a much more rudimentary analysis and understanding of who we are as people. And what was I was going to show you a hologram of a human being. Now then, right, over here. So just for kicks, I've got a hologram here of a crying child, because I do love children actually. I didn't make this child cry, but he kind of, oh, it's Peter Blake. Oh, there you go. There's the portrait of the father of pop, Peter Blake. Doesn't look much like a portrait, does it? This flimsy piece of film. But we've come a long way since oil paintings, haven't we, and sculpture. So this is a portrait. Maybe in 100 years' time people will see that as a normal portrait.
So how do you
we do this?
a person? Because with the lasers,
that
could be quite harmful to the eyes, do you think?
Okay, that is another misnomer. Lasers put in the wrong hands can cause danger. Now, it's not the light that causes harm, it's the invisible frequencies. You're looking at UV, infrared that cause the damage. I mean, I'm looking at, we've got the projector coming forward and it's giving me after images. There's hardly any, and that projector is like 100 times more powerful than this tiny laser. But because people aren't used to dealing with lasers, we've got a shed load of rules that we apply to laser technology. So when I'm creating holograms of people, yes, it's a powerful laser, but the laser beam is passed through a sophisticated filtering system before the light even reaches them. What's going to be exciting is how we transform this to the next phase of technology, and that's going to be in the animation. And believe it or not, we're even working on the sound, the holophonics for these, using binaural recording. So these are all, feel free to have a look, they're interactive. I'm an interactive app, holographic. The best. Any more questions?
How long does that take to do?
Which one, this one?
Yeah.
5 nanoseconds. Do you know how fast light travels? In 5 nanoseconds? 5 feet. I've actually recorded it. So you turn the laser on for an incredibly brief, the mechanical thing, right? Because we can't move in 5 nanoseconds. So it goes, it's like a blip. And then you video the thing, and you slow it down, and you see the streak, like a javelin of light. Passes through the lens, covers the entire human being. Remember what I said about anything moving a micron destroys the exposure? That's why it has to be fast. So you can, to give you a description of one of the most interesting pulse holograms I ever saw, was actually recorded for a ballistics expert for some case that was solving a crime, involving a gun, right? So I'm looking at this hologram, and you can see the police officer firing a pistol, right? And we were supposed to see the bullet. We didn't see the bullet, but there was a hole in the hologram. And if you go round to the other side of the hologram, you can see the bullet floating outside the hologram. So it's also used in all sorts of engineering applications. But, I'm more interested in the creative aspects. Right at the back.
You said that the limitation, the meter by 2 meters.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is that because of the film that you can buy?
Yeah.
Or nobody makes it bigger?
Nobody makes it bigger, so...
Can you put 2 sheets together and will
Yes.
the hologram work as a bigger piece?
You can, yeah. My particular way of solving it is basically a practical problem. Okay, it's not because we can't make them big. It's a practical problem. People not having machines that make it big enough. And my way of solving that is to work with chemists and film manufacturers such as Harman Technology in Ilford. And what they do is to coat material specifically for me. So I can actually make them billboard size, if you like. In fact, I'm supposed to be starting on a commercial project in a couple of weeks with a very well-known. I'm going to get myself into trouble in a minute because I'm not supposed to be telling anyone, eh? But it's a well-known sporting event, and they want some massive holograms for the stadiums.
Yeah, why have they not been around before? Like, why have we not seen holographic billboards?
Okay, technology.
So expensive, or?
No, when I began, the lasers I was working with were about the size of this table. They weighed a ton. They were three-phase. They were water-cooled, right? And they cost around £80,000 each. Now you can get the same system, no bigger, I kid you not, than that, for about 10 grand. So as technology, is the understanding we've got of the medium that we're recording into, photopolymers, nanoparticle silvers, etc. And full colour, you know, and digital. My God, come on guys, have a look at this one here. You know, there's a million reasons it couldn't have happened before, but it was critical that we went through that evolution to understand the medium totally, which I think we do now.
So how are things going to change in the future?
How are things going to change? This is the future.
Yes, question at the back.
Things don't change.
How much do you think holography will influence weapon technology?
Weapon technology. Weapon technology. Where are you from?
From the games course perspective.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let me give you an example of how it's going to improve weapon technology. Okay. So, if you make a double exposure, okay, you make, for example, you could have a ballistics shell, right? And this has been done. I know, I've seen it happen at Loughborough University. And you, so you've got a beautiful hologram of a ballistic shell, okay, nice and shiny and bright. And then just before you're about to ignite the shell, you make a second exposure. You'll be able to see where the most effective areas of impact or, you know, destruction that shell will be able to cause in the form of black lines. It gives you like a non-destructive testing outline of what's going to happen a millisecond before the shell explodes. And if you know what's going to happen then, you can increase the potential damage you want to cause your enemy. Isn't it horrible? What a horrible question. Jesus. Any more?
I wanted to ask what is holophonics, because I'm just hearing this for the first time.
Holophonics.
Is it like 3D sound, or
Yeah.
we already have like stereo sound?
Yeah, we got stereo, binaural. You're probably semi-aware with
Also,
sweet spot.
and how does that affect speakers you built?
Okay. Well, remember in holographic theory, you've got two light beams. Okay, you've got a pure light source and you've got a refracted light source. So this one's carrying information, this one is pure. And where they collide, they produce an interference. Okay, it's a natural phenomenon, and it happens with sound as well. So if we were to send a frequency from one speaker, a pure frequency, to a point in space where it collides with a second, you produce this sweet spot. You know, and we're going to start seeing this in future. You may have already experienced it in, you know, bus shelters where you stand inside and suddenly you're surrounded by music. Okay, that's holophonic.
How is that going to impact the music industry? Do you see it blowing up or enhance sound in ways that we've never heard before?
Well, I'm going to a music industry gig tonight thing, you know, with some people that are really interested in this. David Bowie, you know, is very interested in the way holophonics is going to be used.
That's awesome. Like, yeah. Can I go?
No.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really sorry. It's like, you know, bouncers at the door and all that crap. So how is it going to affect? Well, hopefully it's going to make better music. But I don't know. I mean, you know, you guys are the creatives. Right?
Is it going to change speakers, earphones?
Yeah, of course, yes.
I'm going to look
Yeah.
into that.
Okay, holophonics. Yeah, cool.
Is there any way, because it's on film, that using this technology with X-ray
thing. So
Yeah.
rather than using CAT scans, you
Yeah.
can get a 3D X-ray
Okay,
coming out.
brilliant, brilliant. Chris, you know, very perceptive tutor, you're lucky to have him. Yes, in medicine, holography is being used increasingly in the States to develop a 3D system whereby you can see through a person rather than at a person. And if the surgeon knows where to operate in a more precise way, the insurance companies are less likely to pay out when the guy snuffs it, because the operation's a success. So yeah, holography medicine, big industry.
So if you're just working on light wave or wavelengths,
Yeah.
you can apply it to all sorts of different wavelengths.
Exactly, that's my mission, Chris. Yeah, all sorts, including water,
Yeah.
including radar.
Anything that vibrates.
Anything that vibrates has the potential of being a holographic medium. Even thoughts, algorithms, biofeedback. That's where it becomes a bit spooky.
One final question, because I'm going to go for lunch.
Yeah.
Is there's been over the last 15 years or possibly more, there's been a big move towards flexible screen.
Right.
It's starting to come into a technology. Can that be used to help the 3D elements within TV and bring that technology forward quicker?
Yes, absolutely. But it's through the use. When you have a chance at the moment to have a look at this digital hologram, you'll notice there's a very fine array of dots. Okay, each one of those dots is a diffraction grating. So when you're looking at this thing, you're not really looking at a completely 3D model. You're looking at points of space as diffractive dots, and those diffractive dots can be applied to flexible illuminated screen technologies in the future.
That is so brilliant. I think that's absolutely brilliant. We've never had anything like this. Okay, so we're going to take a lunch break now. I've got loads of chairs blocking the door.